My dear friends, I'm Dr. Rodrigo Rodriguez, Medical Director of BioCare Hospital. And here I am making a second podcast about cancer. I have tried to put together in a series of 3 programs, or 3 podcasts, a lot of information that I feel it's very important for all of us to know. I have reviewed a lot of information and tried to summarize the most important facts to understand cancer, to create strategies to bypass it or defeat it, and to create real programs, real approaches to cancer solving. These 3 programs are something that I needed to do because I have been a doctor for 50 years and I have been treating cancer patients all my life. I have been seeing a lot more patients than the ones I wish I would have seen. When I began as a young doctor, cancer was really an old person's disease. Yes, we saw it, but we didn't see in the huge amounts that we are seeing today. Cancer is becoming, like obesity and diabetes, a real epidemic. So it's time for us to sit down because we want to fight cancer. And like in any war, understanding and knowing your enemy, it's a very important, very substantial part of whatever strategy you're going to plan. If you don't have the faintest idea of what cancer is, you just say, well, I have cancer. Oh, wow, that's bad. You're not going to go too far. And in this time and age, we, the people, we, the patient, have to put a lot on our side to be able to help solve the problem. It's not only the doctor's problem, it's not only the hospital's problem. There are a lot of things that we can do. That's why I want to share information that I have, put it as simple as possible, so you can review it, you can understand it, and if you have any questions or comments, you can follow me, you can ask questions. I'm at all times ready to answer your questions, your comments, so please follow me on whatever social media you have nowadays, because I'm in all of them. But I want you to watch this series of podcasts because, believe me, I think they're going to be very informative. And remember that information is power. So we have a deadly disease. We have a disease that has produced a lot of anguish and expense and you name it. I don't have to tell you. We all know what we're talking about. And we established in the previous podcast that you can follow on the link and reviewed that cancer is a disease that originates within. It doesn't come as it used to be with abscesses, pneumonia, tuberculosis, gangrene, etc. It is not a disease that's coming from the outside. It is a disease that we generate. It is actually an internal uprising of cells. You know, cells in the human body are all aware, orchestrated, very well choreographed situation. Cells will grow to certain size. So many cells will be produced at every time. So when we're born, we're going to grow to certain size and stop. We don't keep on growing indefinitely. No, things are going to stop at certain time. And then as we get older, things will start going in reverse, as many of you might already have noticed. But all this is handled by who? All this is in our genes. Our genes, we have proto-oncogenes that are going to make cells to be produced, and we have tumor suppressor genes that will reverse that tendency at certain point. In other words, when you have a baby, your baby is growing, and we keep saying, oh, you're taller, you're bigger, you're everything, but there's a point where it stops. It doesn't just go on and on and on indefinitely, because then we have a sick person. like in acromegalia, where people grow to 7 foot height or anything like that. No, we're talking about a normal person. Well, what would happen if a group of those cells will start developing independently of all the controls and will just be producing more and more cells when you have a lump? And that lump is what we call a tumor. Now, those cells are normally controlled by tumor suppressor cells. And tumor suppressor genes are going to be acting to stop that from happening. So cells will be discarded in case they begin with that abnormal growth or out of balance or out of harmony growth in the body. So we have a body that was created in perfection. Now, when we have this harmonic growth managed by all our genes, then things will go in the right direction. We know that. But now the question is, if it is in our genes, as we frequently think, if it is in our genes, if we inherited the problem, is this a doom situation? And we have many genes that we say they're a blessing. But genes are neither doom or a blessing. Genes in our body have the capacity to express themselves or to suppress themselves. Why? Because we have two sets of genes. Remember mom and dad? We have genes from both of them. And them, in turn, have genes from two different people. So our body has a lot of options. Our genes are mixed. We have one with black eyes, one with blue eyes, or we might have two with blue eyes because both our parents have blue eyes. Then we will certainly have blue eyes. But what if one of them has a different eye color? Or what if one of our ancestors' genes just made it through the genetic chain, and then we happen to be blonde when neither of our parents are blonde? You see? So it's a very complex thing. It's not simply as my father is this, my mother is that, I'm going to be sick. No, there are a lot of things. Not only that, but a lot of the expressions in function, let's say a proto-oncogene making an abnormal amount of cells, it can be stopped. And I can suppress that gene. That gene will simply not be expressed, so nothing will happen. I'm going to grow up healthy. I'm never going to find out that I had that oncogene that could have produced a cancer. Why? Because the rest of my genes suppressed it. Because I took care of them. So this is a very important information because we do not have to believe that once we inherit something, we're doomed. There are a lot of things we can do. Lifestyle, chemicals, irradiation. There's so many things, pollutants, that can change that and create a problem. So what we have to do is keep a clean lifestyle. And that is going to be a good way to manage all these genes. But it's important that we have this figure because that tells us that even though we're talking about a deadly disease, we might be able to help in many areas if we just learn to BioCare, to take care of all our systems and functions. This is something that I want you to reflect on because we have to establish that condition. There's one more thing talking about genetic loads. Why is it that we're seeing so many cancer patients? That cannot be just because we inherited those genes. Because in the course of just one generation, let's say in the course of the last 50 years, cancer rate has skyrocketed in numbers. So we haven't had the number of generations that would justify this cancer genetic trait. So what's happening is very obvious. We are producing genetic damage in a very important way. We are hurting ourselves in many ways. So what you have to do, and that's it, that's our gene strategy, is to make a plan on how to keep genes from being damaged. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what can damage genes. Because if we don't understand that part, we're going to keep on doing it without knowing that we are not only producing a damage, but we are creating a terrible disease that might take our lives sooner or later. And the problem is that we're seeing it sooner than later nowadays. Cancer is affecting younger and younger people. That is why I thought I have to put a lot of information, give it to you, try to help you understand what is the problem, where the problem is coming from, and how you can start planning strategies to help yourselves, to help the people you love, and in particular your children. In other words, teach them how to keep a healthy genetic load. You can help your genes. It's not only what you inherited, it's what you're going to do with them. That is your responsibility. I know people that got very bad genes, let's say diabetes, but took an extraordinary care of their lives. And they're not diabetic, or they were able to control it very easy. Which means, yes, there's a lot of things that we have to do. So the first rule of thumb in terms of cancer strategy is you have to take it on yourself. You have to learn. You have to get information. And then you have to see and review what areas are within your power, within your reach, to change it all for the better. Stay with me. We're going to keep on talking about this very important subject. I am Dr. Rodrigo Rodriguez, Medical Director of BioCare Hospital. And today, we are on a second role in a series of 3 programs, 3 podcasts that I'm doing on general information about cancer. And I'm trying to explain what is cancer, how it is produced, what are the consequences of that disease, that disorderly growth of cells that we call cancer, so we can start making a plan, we can understand what we're fighting. Because we are at war. We have a war on cancer. We want to defeat it. We want it out of lives. And the most common explanation, or the one that seems a lot more feasible, because believe it or not, at this point, medicine cannot give you an absolute answer to what is cancer. Medicine doesn't have that answer. If you ask a doctor what is tuberculosis, he's going to tell you in few words what it is. It's going to be accurate. If you say what is inflammation, I can explain you what it is. If you ask me what is a fracture, that's easy. You and I know the answer. If you ask people what is cancer, then we have a problem. We're going to start talking about characteristics or traits or things that cancer do. And about that, you can feel elaborate. But in spite of all that information, nobody can tell you cancer is this, period. So, what we know now is what I feel we should all understand. Number one, that cancer doesn't come from outside. We're not fighting any invader. We're not fighting any foreign thing. It is a disease that arises within ourselves by a disorderly growth of cells that not only will grow, but will have a number of consequences, physiological, functional consequences, that make it deadly, in one word. That's why we're afraid of it. That's why we fear cancer, because it is deadly. So, all those things, from all those things that we now know that in order to generate this disorderly uprising of cells, we need to damage the core, the director of the orchestra that keeps harmony at home. We have cells that grow to certain size, to certain number, to certain functions. But then we have genes that when a cell gets very old or damaged, will instruct the cell to repair. If the cell cannot repair, then that cell will be instructed to disappear, to destroy itself, to commit suicide, call it whatever you want. But this is a programmed self-function that cells have in them. And you say, well, why don't you simply kill this cell, period? Well, it's very simple. If the cell would just exploded, that creates a problem, a functional problem. You are going to release a lot of enzymes, you're going to release inflammatory factors, you're going to release a lot of things. So what the body does, it tells the cell, go out of this world, just disappear, and what the cell does, it becomes a lot more compact, and it changes a lot of the things within, so these cells are going to be, in one word, disarmed. Anything that can be harmful, when the cell breaks down, is going to be disarmed. Enzymes and a lot of chemicals that the cell has are going to become inert. They're going to be no problem. And then finally, when it reaches a smaller, compact way, without any damage possibility, it's going to break down. But it's going to break down not in pieces, but in little globules that have their own membrane, so they don't spread anything around. And then we have white blood cells, the macrophages, that are going to come, eat, and digest all these things to wipe them completely out, leaving an empty space without any trace. Then is when a new cell will take that place. And that cell is going to come from the bank we have of stem cells. And a stem cell is going to come, replace the old cell, create with a brand new cell, with all its functionality, with all its energy and stamina, and really just keep us alive and well and enjoying life. What would happen if that gene that told the cell to disappear would fail? Well, all cells with a lot of damage are not going to go away. They're not going to die. So they will continue on living. And then we have established that some genes, the proto-oncogenes, are going to be telling cells to replicate. If we damage that gene, if we produce a mutation, it is called. What is a mutation? Well, genes are chains of protein. The proteins are like the alphabet. You use different words with different combination of letters. The same thing, you create different proteins with different combination of amino acids, which are the basic form of a protein. If you can change any of those things, we call it a mutation. Let's use a simple word, stop. If you take off the O, it will not say stop anymore. And if you say it, you're not giving an order, you're saying something else. Nothing is going to happen because you didn't say stop. You say stop, I don't know even how to say it. That is a mutation. When one of those little parts of protein either changes, disappears, or stops working. That's a mutation. It's very simple. It's a lot more than microscopic. You could hardly see it under a microscope unless you had an electron microscope. And that damage then can be just doing the wrong signal, which is probably what happens in cancer. We stop telling a group of cells to reproduce, to create more cells, and more cells, and more cells, and self-destruction is not anymore possible because tumor suppressor genes are not acting because they might as well have been mutated. Then you have a lump, and that lump will grow and grow and grow and create what we call a tumor. Genes can be mutated if we damage them. And I'm going to give you very simple examples that you can relate to in your daily life. Let's say you smoke, which is one of the easiest examples. Well, smoke contains a number of chemicals that has been proven that can damage genes. So it's not difficult to explain that cigarette smoke is a toxic that damages genes, then can be the cause of cancer growth. Other type of chemicals. Many of them we cannot control. We breathe them. They're in our food supply. Food supply is inundated with chemicals. All those chemicals can be toxic. Let's say we eat wrong. We eat too much of the wrong thing, too little of other things. We don't have enough vitamins. We don't have enough antioxidants. We don't do anything. We damage the genes. And while I'm saying antioxidants, one of the most common factor in gene damage is free radicals. And free radicals are produced in the body due of the need of coping with things that do not belong in the body, like cigarette smoke, like alcohol, like too much of the wrong food, artificial foods. Did you know that margarine doesn't exist in nature? But you spread it on your bread every day. What could be more unnatural than a substance that no matter where you go in nature, you will never find it? It is a chemical produced in a laboratory. And I could give you 100 examples like that. To me, it's becoming kind of disappointing that today, when I talk to people, I have to say, yes, you can have dairy products as long as what used to be. As long as you have milk, whole milk, as it comes from the cow, from a cow that lives like a cow. that eats grass and roams around and has a very easy, beautiful day. Just picture the image of a cow in Switzerland. So I have to tell people, you have to eat the food as it is, as it used to be from an animal that lives like that animal should be living. That's how distorted a lot of things have happened. And all that, dealing with all those chemicals, dealing with all those substances, dealing with all disorderly lifestyle, damages our genes because we produce a lot of free radicals. And those free radicals go out of the biochemical reaction and immediately bump into a gene. Nothing might happen, but something might happen. And that's happening more and more every year. So let's keep in touch, because you have to learn a lot more about this. My friends, you are with Dr. Rodrigo Rodriguez, Medical Director of BioCare Hospital. And this time, I'm in the middle of a series of 3 programs, 3 podcasts about cancer. Trying to put together things that I know, things that I have read, things that are in the medical literature, but put them all together to try to explain you what is cancer, why it's so fearful, why it's so deadly, where it's coming from, what can we do about it. I'm trying to put together information that I hope it's going to be helpful for you. We have to understand it, because if we want to fight a war, we have to know our enemy. That's why countries spend so much in intelligence. You have to know what they're planning. You have to know what their weapons. You have to know, etc., etc. And then you have the other aspect of a war. You're going to need weapons. You're going to have possibilities of success. You're going to have a lot of logistics. Because, I mean, just dropping a bomb is not fighting a war. You need an aircraft, you need the bomb, you need the training, you need soldiers, you have fuel, you have transportation, you have air bases, you have aircraft carriers, you name it. Think of it for a second. It's a huge, multiple discipline effort. And that's exactly what the body tries to do, first in not getting cancer, and then dealing with it. And the more we know, the more we understand, the more we're going to be able to help our body to do it well. And I don't have to tell you that it's in our best interest to help our body not to get cancer, and if we do, if worse comes to worse, deal with it the best possible way with the best possible results. But to do that, we have to get our hands involved. We have to do something. The medical world, where you got a disease, you went to the doctor, and the doctor solves everything, erase it from your mind. It doesn't really exist. We all have to contribute. We all have to help. And as much effort as your doctor, your radiation team, chemotherapy team, whatever, do, there's a lot of things, there are many things you can do to help yourself. And you are not going to be able to do it well if you don't understand what we're talking about. So we have established a number of facts. We have established that cancer is an internal uprising, very possible produced by damage in our genetic load. Genes that push growth and replication, and genes that do the opposite, stop, suppress that growth. And they do it through a process called apoptosis that we have already briefly described, which is a programmed cell death. We all produce cancer cells. we all make cancer cells. If you think of it, it's not difficult to understand that among millions, if not billions, of cell replications in our body throughout the years, something can go wrong. Something might happen. But then we have genes that are going to detect the damage, and there's one particular gene that you're going to that you're going to hear about, which is called the p53 gene. The p53 gene is a gene that it has a surveillance system over the whole body, over every single cell. And when a cell starts doing something it shouldn't do, because it has been mutated in one part of the gene, it will instruct the cell to repair. Hey, you have a problem with this amino acid. Repair it. And then the cell repairs it. But if the cell cannot repair it, and the damage goes beyond something very simple, then that cell has to go. It must die and leave the place to a brand new cell. That process is called apoptosis, programmed cell death. The cell will get compact, will disarmed, enzymes and all the tools it has to digest and to create problems and to create inflammation and so on, and then will break in small globules that are going to be eaten, phagocytized, that's the technical word, by the white blood cells. Clean space, brand new cell, out of our bank of stem cells, and business as usual. P53, not surprisingly, is damaged in 50%, in half of all cancers, no matter where the cancer is. Could be in the brain, could be in the lung, could be in the liver, could be in the breast. It is mutated, it's changed. So it's not doing its job. It's not telling an abnormal cell, go away. It will let it grow. Now, if that comes also with a damaged oncogene, which is going to induce reproduction of cells, then you have the perfect combination of problems of a huge growth with no possibility of death. That is the beginning of the problem. But we have now some other problem that actually makes cancer deadly. It's not just a trait. It is the real basis of why cancer is so feared and why cancer kills so many people. Without that particular activity, cancers would be just cell masses that any surgeon could go, remove, put it in a garbage can, and go on with your life. But those of you that have either experienced cancer or have lived with people with cancer know that unfortunately that's not always true. The surgeon goes, takes the tumor out, puts it in the garbage can, and he says, everything is gone. Of course, he didn't have a microscope in his eyes, nor he did a full scan of the body to make sure that, yes, everything is gone. So what happens is, time after, we're going to see a new tumor developing somewhere else. And that is called a metastasis. That's called metastatic disease. That's what makes cancer deadly, and that is what produces 90% of all cancer deaths are produced by metastatic growth, not the tumor. A breast cancer will not kill anybody, but if it goes to your brain, if it goes to your lung, if it goes to your liver, if it goes to your bones, it finally is going to kill you. How metastasis can happen? Well, Metastasis can happen when certain things in the body change. The first thing you need is that a cell from that cancer leaves the original tumor. Easier said than done. Cells are stuck together by a number of unions, of biochemical unions that keep them together. That's why our body doesn't fall apart. So you have to break those unions. And they use enzymes and tricks and so forth in order for one cell to separate from the original tumor. But there is one more problem. A breast cell from a breast cancer leaves the original cancer. How can it go somewhere else? It needs to have some way of transportation. And that transportation, the body has plenty of. We have blood vessels that circulate the whole body. We have a lymph system that goes around the whole body. So if a cell, one of those cancer cells, can enter the bloodstream or can enter the lymph system, then it's going to be able to travel wherever it wants. So the cell will enter that highway, so to speak, and travel to wherever it wants. But to do that, it has to transfer the membranes and the linings of the blood vessels or of the lymph system. Once in the blood, once in the lymph, will go somewhere else. Once again, we'll have to transfer out of the blood vessel, out of the lymph vessel, and enter a new tissue, and in that new tissue will start a new tumor. And it is not surprising that many times in metastatic disease, you don't get one, but you get several metastases at the same time. So you might have a cancer in one place, and all of a sudden you find out you have something in the lung, something in the liver, or something in the bone, something in the brain, which are the most common organs where cancer spreads to through the blood, or lymph glands that start swelling because they have a cancer cell that they try to trap, but the cancer cell is growing and growing and growing, and again creating a tumor in a lymph gland. This is very common, for example, in breast cancer, where it can travel through the lymph nodes of the axilla or the chest. And then you have not one tumor to deal with. You have several of them, if not many. And even if it's only one, if it happens to go in the right place, then you have a big problem. If it happens to go to your brain, you're going to know about it very soon and in very difficult circumstances. So that possibility of metastatic disease is a problem. But again, to do that, the cell will have to detach from the original tumor, go through the membranes of the blood vessel, go through the membranes of the lymph vessel, so it can travel, and then it has to have the possibility of going through that membrane again back to some tissue. How can the cell do that? Well, in many cases we help. So stay with me, because we have the next chapter coming. My dear friends, you are with Dr. Rodrigo Rodriguez, Medical Director of BioCare Hospital. And today I'm on my second podcast about cancer, of a series of 3. And I would like you, I would love you to listen to this whole series. Because I have been thinking about it for a long time, and reading and putting together everything I know, and trying to digest it myself first in order to be able to give you information that is easy and flowing for you to understand cancer. Because in all the years I have been a doctor, I have always taken the easy position of saying, well, sir, you have cancer of this, we have to do this and that. And the doctor says, but why? What? And what is it? Why me? Why did I get it? And we don't have the answers. Don't think that your doctor is in his ivory tower. No, it's just that he doesn't know. He doesn't have the answer. So what do you say? Well, you answer something like, oh, let's wait for this marker to come back, let's see, and we're going to do this. But we never answer those questions because we don't have the answers. So with 50 years experience as a doctor, I have heard a lot of questions. And I'm trying to answer the questions that you might have. And today, we have so much information about cancer that I think that it's absolutely fair that somebody puts all that information together, digests it a little bit, and offers you the best possible explanation you can give to a problem for which we do not really have true answers today. And I have already mentioned in the previous blog about a lot of traits and characteristics of cancer. And I have mentioned the ones that lump cancers in one disease. I have listened and I have read and I have seen a lot of conferences where people tend to say cancer is not a disease, it's a number of diseases. It's 100 different diseases. Because you have of the lung, of the skin, you have lymphomas, you have leukemias, you have blah, 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 blah. If we try to fight, if we want to handle 100 diseases, where do I start? You, as a common folk that are living your life trusting that medicine is taking care of you, where do you start taking care of you? Well, the only thing is breast cancer. If you're a man, okay, that very little chances, because there is breast cancer in men. Very rare, but there is. But other than that, it's very difficult to tell. I don't smoke, so I don't have lung cancer. I don't have to worry about lung cancer. But what about bladder cancer? What about stomach cancer? What about this? Well, let's try to, instead of splitting cancers into 100 diseases, what I decided is we have to lump them into the features, the characteristics that are shared by all cancers. One, and second, and the most important, that make them feared and deadly. Because that's what we really care for. We want to make sure we're not going to get cancer, and if we do, we want to make sure we're not going to die of cancer. And with all that I have read, with all that I have seen, and the more I know, the more convinced I am that you have in your hand, within your reach, a lot of the possible ways to make it successful. That is important. And we have reviewed already today about characteristics of cancer, and we have explained a little bit further than on the previous podcasts about genetic conditions, how they happen, how we can fight them off, how we can correct them, how we can keep them off our lives, etc., etc. And we have talked about a very important characteristic of cancer, which is metastatic disease. Why? Because metastatic disease kills 90% of people. We have also discussed about apoptosis, a mechanism through which we can get rid of abnormal cells if we do them. And the information that we have is that we make cancer cells all the time. But our system can get rid of them, dispose them, through a process called apoptosis, which is a programmed cell death. With all those facts, you might think at this point, Doctor, you're talking a lot about technical things that I don't know what I can do with them. They're very interesting. I love the way you talk. I hope you say that, etc. But what is for me? What do I have to do? Well, we have already established that genetic damage can be avoided by clean lifestyles. We have talked about that many, many times in these podcasts. If you have followed me, I have talked about that many times. I have talked about that genetics is not a doom or a savior, it's not a blessing. We can manage our genes, and it's really within our reach to manage our genes. But then we talked about apoptosis and we talked about metastasis. Let me tell you something. Remember, I was telling you that the cancer cell has to go through the arterial wall, through the veins, in order to be able to travel in the blood, and then be able to go through those membranes again in order to go to a different tissue? Well, that happens. It happens normally. It happens in our body all the time. How? Through the mediation of a number of cytokines, of enzymes, of chemical products that we normally produce, but we produce them a lot under inflammation. When you hurt your body, you produce inflammation. And one of the key factors of inflammation is to avoid immediate cell death. So it delays death. It delays apoptosis. It inhibits apoptosis, in fact. And it makes the blood vessels a lot more permeable, a lot more feasible for any product to go through the arterial or the lymph walls. Why? Because you have a damaged area. And that damaged area, through the inflammatory environment, will create an area where the body can send stem cells, proteins, healing proteins, clotting proteins, a lot of things to help the damage. You have seen it, you have noticed it. If any of you have ever put a hammer on your finger or left a finger in the car's door, you know that it'll immediately get big, hot, painful. That huge size, that hot feeling, etc., is due to the fact that the blood vessels open up and release a lot of substances from the blood vessel into the tissue. That's why it swells. That's why it gets red. That's why it gets hot. So it's a normal process. But what should happen is that as soon as the problem disappears, the inflammation environment should be gone. But what happens if we do things every day, several times a day, that enhance an inflammatory environment, a chronic inflammatory environment, as many of us do? By eating sugar, refined sugar in particular, refined carbs, bad fats, smoke, drink, get polluted food, get polluted substances, have artificial foods like margarine or things like that, live in a heavy polluted environment. We don't take care of ourselves, we don't exercise, we don't breathe well. Well, we're going to have living with a chronic inflammatory environment. And I'm not giving you this up. I'm just telling you that out of the people that I see today, out of every single patient that I see today at BioCare, we do a full inflammatory profile. And let me tell you, it's disappointing. I have seen people 20 years old, 25 years old, young and beautiful, and you look at them and they have an inflammatory profile that's coming from their lifestyles. What can you do? These people are going to develop cancer. Obesity. Obesity is intrinsically inflammatory. If you're overweight or obese, you live with an inflammatory process. And no wonder the statistics of obesity mirror the rise and frequency of the statistics of cancer. Why? Because these people live with an inflammatory environment day in, day out, every morning, every evening. So we have to start facing those facts. We have to understand that we have to start biocaring ourselves. And BioCare Hospital is implicitly anti-inflammatory, because that is our foremost, our basic arm and our basic tool of defense. Because if we don't control inflammation, a lot of things are going to happen bad with cancer. So you have a lot of information, you have a lot of resources. You have to follow me. You have to read and watch a lot of these blogs on obesity, on weight control, on diabetes, on sugar, on food, on everything. Because if you change all that, you can change your life for better. Remember that I said we have 3 programs. So I still have 1 more to go, and you should also follow it. See you next time.